Hello, welcome back to my channel. Um, Thanks to everyone that's made comments in my previous videos. Um, I want to address something that's been brought up. I didn't expect to make this video, but I think it's interesting, and it's how atheists view themselves. The I was challenged by several atheists who came back, and when I said, atheists are people that don't believe in God. They came back and they said that there's actually a definition, and let me get it here. Definition of atheism: the, disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. And that's the one that most sent me or commented back to me. And when I went investigating this, I was surprised. I didn't know this, but there are various definitions on atheism, and there's actually something called positive atheism and negative atheism. And one of the ones that really surprised me was that the lack of belief in God. Um, that would include, let's say, a 2 or 3 year old child who isn't aware of and would never even question God. They don't have the belief, and so they would be considered in some circles to be an atheist. Something I can appreciate that there are different definitions. um, I still hold that, and even if you have a lack of belief, once you're an adult and you've made a conscious choice, because sometimes it involves people that don't choose either way, which a lot of us would regard as simply agnostic. I just don't know. Maybe not. We would just say that's agnostic. But under certain definitions, that's a lack of belief in God. They've never made a positive affirmation, and so they would be atheists under certain definitions. But in the end, I think that's why I keep saying, and please, I don't want. I'm not doing this to challenge or to. Well, man, I'm challenging you, but this isn't meant as a way to disrespect people. Look, I think that a lot of us that have some belief in God are maybe 51-49. 49 is that we could be atheists ourselves. It's a very difficult thing to believe in God. Um, and some of us find our faith challenged all the time. I wrote some notes down, um, as I've never done this before, but I wanted to write them down to make sure that I caught this. Um, anyway, one of the things I wanted to bring up as an example, or something that's important to me. Years ago, my father mentioned. My father and I read a lot, and we share things sometimes. Now, I did not read this, but my father read a book on Paula Allende. She was the daughter of Isabel Allende. Isabel Allende wrote House of Spirits, and Paula was her daughter. And it was a daughter that eventually passed away. Um, and I don't know if this was in the book, but there's a scene in the novel where Isabella and the mother is at a funeral, and maybe it's her daughter's, but I don't know. But in the funeral, probably not. But at the funeral, my guess is it's back in Chile, and it's probably a Catholic funeral service. And she went to pay respects. She sat in the back, and she looked forward to all these people out in front of her who were praying, for the repose, the soul of the person that had died. And Isabella Allende writes that as she sat in the back, she felt pity for all of these fools who believed in something beyond this life. Because, of course, atheists sometimes think that, of course, well, they think that nothing happens. And if they do have any consolation, they believe that we live on through our genes and through our children and so on. We go back into the earth, and that comes up, and that continues. That we continue that way. But Isabella was in the back, and she was feeling this way. But she writes that as time went on, that feeling of pity changed to a feeling of envy, and that was because those people had hope, and she didn't. And you could say that it's an illusion, but the feeling's there. It sets the stage for our lives going forward, that we do have hope. I remember years ago, and this was something that was very sad. My daughter and I had my wife and I had a daughter that passed away from a heart condition. And when she passed away, I was on the net and I was looking up stories and trying to come to terms with this, trying to find a way to live with this. And I remember coming across one story. You run down through this, you meet other people that have gone through something similar, and you try to see what they did and how they were able to deal with it. And there were some beautiful stories of people that found a way to compartmentalize that pain and move on. And something that they did something positive out of it. Anyway, they were all very hopeful, even though they were struggling with this. And but there was one that I read, and that woman was an atheist. She described herself as an atheist, and the anguish she was going through, because she said she knew that she was never going to see her daughter again, and that the pain was unbearable. And from somebody that's on the other side and has experienced that pain, I remember once writing about this. I find great peace that I did the best that I could. And one day when I meet my daughter again and I tell her I love her, I know she will believe me. And there's enormous peace in thinking that. Now, of course, somebody that doesn't believe that would say, well, it's just hopeful thinking. That's just, your way of coping with this. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely true. No one. I remember speaking once to a coworker of mine, an older man, and we said, agreed. We don't know what happens in the end after this life because no one's come back to tell us. So all we have is our faith in whatever we believe. Reincarnation. This other gentleman believed in reincarnation, so they believed they would come back and so on. But um, there's a great deal of peace that you find in having those beliefs, and if you don't, that's that's very very hard. It's very painful. Um, anyway, the next thing I was going to talk about is there's a movie that I remember mentioning um, called Particle Fever, and somebody wrote um, a comment, and it was very long, and I appreciate that you're writing this. But one of the things that they wrote about was, um, and I hope I get this right. If I don't, I apologize. I wish I would have copied it down. But it had to do with the universe coming into existence. And they talked about high energy and low energy. And I've seen this before. Um, there is the idea that, like I mentioned in one of my other videos, about sometimes people change definitions of words because they needed to change so that they can justify something that they're thinking. I mentioned that with gender and with the word racism. And the other one is the word nothing. And those of us, in fact, it's scientific, that um, when you go back to the Big Bang, the singularity that was there was no time and space, and there was nothing. There was truly nothing. And now the definition's changed, where nothing doesn't mean nothing. Nothing allows for energy to be there. And from energy, things can, in space, things can come into existence spontaneously. But then you've changed the definition of nothing. So now it doesn't mean the same thing. At the beginning of time, time really did begin. Matter came into existence. Energy came into existence. But there was a point before, for lack of a better word, in existence where there was no time, there was no matter, no mass, no energy. There truly was nothing. And that's debatable, but that's what people seem to think nowadays, that there was nothing. Um, so that's the challenge. I guess what I'm trying to say at the end, and what I've kind of been thinking about is among those of us that are believers, you've got tons of different explanations in religions and differences in people that are religious versus being spiritual. Everyone trying to answer questions that are really difficult, and but we do it um, understanding or with the premise that we already believe in God or a higher power, something along those lines. And there's a great deal of conflict, and there's no, well, there's very little consensus with a lot of us. But on the other side, among atheists, there's also a lot of diversity and a lot of atheists that um, accept their atheism, but it's different from person to person and group to group. There are different ways of viewing. Like I said, there's positive and negative. There's a lack of belief, and then there are people that outright say there is no God, and I know it for a fact. One of my favorites, I believe, is Adam Carolla. I've heard him say it. Several of them I've heard them say, "There is no God. I know it as a fact." In fact, there are some very passive atheists, and then there's some very militant atheists. Just like there are very religious and militant religious people, and some very passive ones. And it's a great question to ask. We all, um, most of us that are active on this, that are not passive, we ask ourselves this question. And I have this thing that I say to people about um, my views on certain things. They're my views on politics and my views on religion. And my view is simply I want to know the truth, and I'll follow it wherever it leads me. And this is where I am at this point, which surprises me. But until something comes along that's different, I am currently a devout traditionalist Catholic. One last thing I wanted to point out before I end this video. Um, there was somebody that I met recently, and it was at a funeral service, and their wife had passed away. And when they were talking to me, and our children went to the same Catholic school, um, but a lot of people send their kids to Catholic school who are not believers, they're not even Christian, but maybe they believe it's safe, or they like the academics, or maybe it's just convenient for them, but they don't have any of the same beliefs. And when they were talking to me, they um, expressed, how much they dislike religion and the litany of things, the Crusades and Inquisitions and all the bad things that have happened. And I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, but when I go back and I study history, some of these things are not quite the way that they are. And remember what I said earlier. My premise is I just want to know the truth. The Inquisition was not what a lot of people think that it is. If you were go back and read history, even something as simple as Wikipedia, which gets a lot of things wrong, but at least they have some references. But among people that have studied, for example, let's say the Inquisitions, it appears that there were several Inquisitions. The biggest one was the Spanish Inquisition, which lasted, I believe it was like 300 to 500 years, somewhere in there. And in that time, 3,000 people were executed. Now, a lot of people were brought before the Inquisition, but 3 people were executed, and a significant number of those were executed on capital crimes. If you go back and you study and you research how this works, it's not exactly what you think. The Crusades were first called by one of the popes. I can't remember. I think it was one of the Innocents, Pope Innocent something, back in about 1070 something. Because I think it took 20 years to eventually ship all of them off. But then the kings of Europe got together and they sent the soldiers for the first crusade, which was the only one that was successful. Subsequent crusades, they were just a bunch of thugs. Sometimes they'd start off with good intentions and then they became a bunch of thugs. And they did a bunch of bad things, slaughters and stealing and so on. But the argument that those of us that are religious are that these are people, and just because somebody does something and they don't follow the faith doesn't mean that the faith isn't worth defending or worth exploring. Some of the worst people. I remember there's a great book by The World Does Travel by Dr. Scott Peck. It's been an incredible book, and a lot of people that I know say it's impacted their lives positively. Great advice. But if you know who Dr. Scott Peck is in his personal life, he was not a good guy. He didn't have a relationship with his children. He was unfaithful to his wife several times. He was not a good guy, but the advice that he gave was very good. And there was one last thing I was going to talk about. I have written down here George Orwell, but I think that's about the changing of the language. Oh, yes, here's the last one. This is an interesting point, and it's this. I remember reading, and I think that it in Italy, a university, and I don't know which one. I just remember reading about it, that they discovered that love, and they discovered that it's a protein. And this goes back to the belief among atheists. And something, I may be getting some of this wrong on some atheists, but some atheists do believe this, and some atheists and in fact, I believe it's the most common understanding of atheists, believe that, um, for example, babies are not as sophisticated as a pig, for instance, and their reasoning, and that all that we are a bunch of chemical reactions. And like I said, in some university in Italy, they said love was a protein, and so um, that's what love is. And so when you tell someone that you love them, if they were consistent and they were an atheist, they might follow through because of the emotions that they're feeling, but in their minds, their reason would tell them that it's just a bunch of chemical reactions that happened. If you believe that, however, then your reason is an illusion as well. Your reason is just a bunch of chemical reactions. And so when you say that you arrived at something through your reason, you really didn't. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching my channel. And, I appreciate you guys listening to me and writing the comments down. These are all done stream of consciousness. I know that I get things wrong, and sometimes because I'm speaking in just, like I said, stream of consciousness, I get things wrong and I make mistakes. But anyway, there you have it. Thank you for watching. If you hit the like button, it helps me. Subscribe and leave comments. And thank you for watching. Have a great day.